Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 8 symphonies. 8 of them, yes, by a marvelous Swiss symphonist who you may not know. His name is Hans Huber. It's easy to remember. He's on the Sterling label. And this is really one of the great unknown symphonic legacies. I really believe that. Huber's music is kind of ignored or dismissed because harmonically, he was somewhat conservative. Formally and otherwise, he was very, very interesting. His symphonies are rather nifty, actually. I'm going to take you through them so you'll see what I mean. But he really deserves some attention. His music would be extremely popular if it was performed. Some of these pieces are unbelievably memorable immediately. Some of his thematic material may strike you as not as memorable as the greats, the Brahmses or the Dvorak's and people like that. But, I think part of that's a function of familiarity. Once you get to know it, it becomes obviously part of your routine, part of your life, part of your experience. And the best of it will stay with you because it's good, solid music and interesting music. And he wrote 8 symphonies, and there's some other orchestral works here too, all of which is worth hearing. He actually composed quite a ton of music. His dates were 1852 to 1921. But the interesting thing about these symphonies is that other than the first, which was written in the 1880s, everything else came after 1900. And so they are 20th century symphonies, and they are for that reason, they were kind of sort of sad. They were sort of dismissed because, like I said, his harmonic idiom is very late 19th century romantic, tuneful and emotional and direct. All the things we like, which was all the things that the more progressive composers and musicians and musicologists at the turn of the 20th century were ready to dump on. So there's no excuse today for not enjoying Huber for what he did. And I'm going to take you through all of these symphonies, starting with number 1, which is actually attached to this wonderful 5-disc set. The performances, by the way, are with the Stuttgart Philharmonic under Jörg-Peter Weigle, who conducts them very well. They're very well recorded. This is really, really top quality stuff that Sterling has for us. And this box is readily available. It's all out there. You can get it easily. So number 1, let's see if I can do these in order because they're not coupled in order. Number 1 is the William Tell Symphony. Why it's a William Tell Symphony, we aren't really told, except that the scherzo, which is the third movement, is in slow wedding march tempo, whatever that may be. This is a very, very pretty symphony, a romantic symphony. I mentioned Dvorak. That's who it reminds me of in some respects. It has wonderfully refined orchestration. This guy could really write for the orchestra. It's a function of the best composers from this period, from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when orchestras really got going, that they really knew how to compose for a big orchestra and use the woodwind section and do things to make wonderful sonority. And it's a beautiful, beautiful work. Number 2, let me find it here. Number 2, here we go. Number 2 is the Arnold Böcklin Symphony. Böcklin, a painter. He wrote The Isle of the Dead that Rachmaninoff turned into a tone poem, and so did Max Reger, who wrote a Böcklin suite on 4 of Böcklin's paintings, some of which are in here, although The Isle of the Dead is not. So this particular thing has 4 movements, the last one of which is a fabulous theme and variations, and each variation is a reflection of one of Böcklin's paintings. So it's kind of like pictures in an exhibition. It's just marvelously inventive and colorful, but it's his opus 115 from 1900. So he didn't really get going with symphonies until later in his career. And that's often a good thing because that meant he was ready for it and he knew what he was doing. You also get on this his symphonic introduction to his opera Der Simplicius, and his Lustspiel Overture from 1879, which is quite early, but that's already opus 50. So this guy was busy. He was really busy guy. Now let's look at number 3. Let me find number 3 here in this stack. Here's 3. Now 3 is also, these are fascinating. It's subtitled The Heroic. And it is heroic. It's full of Sturm und Drang and energy and vigor. It was in some ways an answer to Richard Strauss's Ein Heldenleben, which was written around 1898 or so, and this was written in 1902. But the interesting thing about this is the third movement, which is Totentanz. It has a funeral march, second movement funeral march, like Beethoven's Eroica, right? But then you get a Dance of Death scherzo, which is based on the Dies Irae tune as a waltz. So it's, ya da 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 dum bum da da. Yeah. I mean, so that's kind of cool. It's one of those tunes that we hear quite often in millions of pieces by Liszt and Rachmaninoff, and that everybody used it. And then the finale is a big, passionate sort of divagation thing, going crazy. But at the end, it all calms down, and a solo soprano comes in, singing the Sanctus from the Mass, and that's what ends it, with a quiet organ accompaniment, which is fascinating because this is exactly the same period also as Mahler's Fourth Symphony, which is from 1900, and which also features a solo soprano in the finale. I mean, these are interesting symphonies. You know what I mean? They've got resonances with music of the period and other music that we know, and they'll really feel comfortable when you listen to them because they're distinctive and original in their own way, but they have reflections of other things, and you'll be fascinated being able to sort of put things in their slots there when you listen to these. Now, number 4 is called the academic, which is always a bad idea, when you're doing music, to call anything academic, but academic in a good sense. This is a symphony / concerto grosso. That's why it's called academic, because it reflects the older style. But there's nothing academic about it. It's for 2-string orchestras, organ, and piano, which is just a fascinating combination. And Huber creates just wonderful textures using this seemingly very austere outlay of instruments, but what you get is just the opposite. What you get is just a fabulously rich and wonderfully varied, sonic panorama. He uses the organ a lot in these symphonies, by the way. And the movement titles are interesting. It's Prelude and Fugue, Cavatina, Humoresca, and another variation finale. And you have solo strings, obviously, because it's like solo strings, and then you've got the piano, and you've got the organ, and you've solo bass part. It's just fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So that's 4. Now number 5 is called The Romantic, and it's based on a poem called Der Geiger von Gmünd. That's the violinist, the fiddler of Gmünd. The Fiddler is a poem. You could read the poem if you want. I don't really care about the poem. The piece has 3 big movements. The first of which is a pastoral. It's only 5 minutes long. Then you've got an adagio, which is a theme and variations. And the variations, as in the Böcklein Symphony, where each variation has a painting, each variation represents a different verse or line or happening in this poem. That's what this fiddler is doing, whatever the fiddler's doing. And then there's a second movement. Well, the first movement is sort of like a pastoral and then adagio, and it's all combined. It's formally very interesting. The second movement is an allegro and a march, and then the finale is a big, passionate 16-minute conflagration. The whole thing's about 45 minutes long. And you also get his first serenade called Summer Nights, Opus 86 from 1885. A lovely, lovely work. I mean, Huber was basically a happy guy, and his music is it's not that it can't be dark or tragic. I mean, it can be, it sometimes is, but there's a certain joyfulness to everything that he does that you always hear, even when the music is dark or sad or whatever. There's always this sort of lyrical impulse that runs through it that really carries it along very, very effectively. So that's number 5. Now, number 6, let me find it here. Oh, there's number 6. It was attached to the Heroic Symphony number 3. So number 6 is not given any title at all. It's just Symphony number 6. And it's a beautiful, beautiful work with no programmatic anything going about it at all. You just listen to it and love it. It's in A major, and it's a beautiful, work, which we can go over down to number 7. 7 is right here. 7 is the Swiss. It's in D minor. It's the Swiss. It's about mountains and things. And, the first movement is on the mountains. The second is another wedding procession, a peasant wedding procession, like, Goldmark's Landlicher Hochzeit. Well, this is a Landlicher Hochzeitzug, a wedding procession. That's the Zug part. So you've got a couple wedding processions in these symphonies. And then you've got the Abendstimmung in the mountains, evening, whatever, twilight things and voices in the mountains, and a finale. And it's very Swiss and just delicious. I mean, what's not to love about Swiss things? And finally, Symphony number 8. There's number 8. It's over here. There it is. It's in F major. It also has an organ part. It's very concise. It's 28 minutes long. It recalls Beethoven's 8th, which is also in F major and is also quite concise. And this is just a joyous, happy, vivacious, feel-good piece of music. I mean, and that's, I'm so grateful for composers who do those, because there aren't enough of them, and it's very successful. It has not a dull second in it, and the whole series here is fabulous. I mean, this is just guy, you just got to get to know him. It's wonderful. I first heard these things, and I went and got all the scores because I was so excited, because I was like, who is this guy? What is this stuff? It's just beautiful symphonic music, late romantic, by a guy who really, really knew how to write and knew what he was doing. It's again on the Sterling label, and it features the Stuttgart Philharmonic under Jörg-Peter Weigle, and you will love it. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.